Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into something kind of fun?
Fun. Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah, so we're going to tackle this question of what year in movie history had the absolute best movies?
Ooh, okay, the best year debate. That's a tough one. Everyone's got an opinion.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we're using a list from the Top Tens website. It's called Top 10 Best Years for Movies.
So we're talking like user-submitted rankings and comments, right? Lots of different perspectives.
Yeah, a totally melting pot of opinions. And you know what? There are way more than just 10 years being championed on here.
Makes sense. I mean, every movie fan has their favorite year, right? The one that just defined their movie-going experience.
Right. Okay, so speaking of favorites, right off the bat, this list crowns 1994 as the champion.
1994. Oh, wow. Yeah, okay, I could see that. I mean, Pulp Fiction, Shawshank Redemption, Forrest Gump, all in the same year.
I know, it's a powerhouse lineup, right?
No doubt. And think about it. Each of those films really transcended their genre. They became cultural touchstones.
That's so true. Okay, so we tell the cult classic, the deeply moving drama, the feel-good movie of the decade, but then 1994 also throws in The Lion King, Dumb and Dumber, Speed, The Mask. How do you even compete with that variety?
It's a wild mix. But that's what makes 1994 so interesting, right? There's something for everyone, and so many of those films are still quoted and referenced today.
Seriously. Okay, but hold on, because 1999 is coming in strong as a challenger, Fight Club, The Matrix, American Beauty. These films tapped into some anxieties of the time, didn't they?
Absolutely. The late 90s were a fascinating time. You had the dot-com bubble about to burst, a lot of uncertainty about technology, and those films kind of reflected that unease.
Yeah. When Brad Pitt's talking about rejecting IKEA and Fight Club, that definitely resonated with people.
For sure, it captured a certain feeling of disillusionment with consumerism, a real anti-establishment vibe.
Yeah. It makes you wonder if there's something about the 90s in general, this whole decade, that just fostered a certain kind of creative energy in filmmaking.
It's an interesting thought. Maybe a perfect storm of a thriving indie scene, new technology becoming more accessible, and a generation that was ready for something different.
Makes sense. Now, one thing that stands out about this best years list is that a lot of the entries go beyond just listing the movies. They dive into the historical context. One entry for 1982 goes as far as explaining its place in the Gregorian calendar.
I love that. It might seem like a quirky detail, but it speaks to a real passion for film history. Some people don't just watch movies, they immerse themselves in the whole context.
It's like their inner film scholar can't help but come out. And speaking of film scholarship, one commenter points out that several 1982 films, Blade Runner and Fanny and Alexander, to name a few, have perfect 100% scores on Rotten Tomatoes.
Wow, that's saying something. For films of that era to get perfect scores from critics, that's almost unheard of.
Right. It shows how those films have aged, how their critical reception has evolved over time. Sometimes a film's impact isn't fully appreciated upon its initial release.
Totally. Like Blade Runner, it was kind of a cult classic for years before it got the widespread recognition it deserved.
Now get this, someone makes the bold claim that 1939 is the best year for acting, even surpassing modern films.
Whoa, that's a statement. 1939, the golden age of Hollywood. I mean, there's definitely a distinct style to classic acting.
Right, is there a noticeable difference between classic Hollywood acting and the way actors perform today?
Absolutely. Back then, a lot of film actors came from the theater. So their performances often had this heightened theatricality that you don't see as much now.
So instead of subtle expressions and nuanced delivery, it was more about projecting emotions on a grand scale.
Exactly. It was all about big gestures, booming voices, really commanding the audience's attention.
That's fascinating, and it makes sense when you think about how the technology of the time influenced the acting itself.
For sure. Without the sophisticated special effects and editing we have today, actors had to carry more of the storytelling burden on their shoulders.
Okay, so 1939, all about the acting. Now let's fast forward to 1984, the year that basically gave birth to a ton of sequels and franchising.
1984. Oh, yeah.
Beverly Hills Cop, Ghostbusters, Indiana Jones, and The Temple of Doom, The Terminator.
Right. It's like the birthplace of the modern blockbuster.
Totally. And you can see how those films really influenced Hollywood's business model. I mean, these weren't just hit movies, they were cultural phenomena that studios could build entire franchises around.
It's wild to think about how many franchises we love today, like the ones that just rake in billions at the box office, had their roots in this one year.
I know it's crazy, right? 1984 really was a turning point for Hollywood.
Yeah, big time. Okay, so these best year picks, it's like they offer a glimpse into someone's personal movie journey, like what films shape their tastes.
Totally. They often reflect the listener's age, the movies they grew up with, what was culturally significant during their formative years.
Makes sense. Okay, you listening, what about you? If you had to pick your ultimate movie year, what would it be and why? Hit us up in the comments. Yeah, let's hear it. What year would you choose to relive?
Okay, getting back to the list, there's this one year that's causing quite a stir online, 1993. One commenter even calls it Spielberg's year.
Ooh, 1993. Interesting. He did give us Jurassic Park and Schindler's List that year.
Right. Talk about range. Like, was Spielberg always this versatile?
Well, he'd already proven himself with films like Jaws and E.T., but 1993 really showcased his ability to tackle completely different genres.
Yeah, you have Jurassic Park, which was this groundbreaking spectacle pushing the boundaries of visual effects. And then in the same year, he releases Schindler's List, this incredibly powerful and moving film about the Holocaust.
It's amazing, right, to have the vision and the emotional depth to create two such different masterpieces in such a short span of time.
Okay, so we've talked about quality versus quantity, but then there are years like 2014 that seem to strike a perfect balance. We've got critical darlings like Birdman, Whiplash, The Grand Budapest Hotel.
Don't forget the blockbusters. Guardians of the Galaxy Edge of Tomorrow, like 2014, had it all.
Right. Who knew Tom Cruise fighting aliens could be so thought-provoking? And the animated films. The Lego Movie was a surprise smash, and How to Train Your Dragon 2 proved that sequels can actually be better than the original.
For sure, 2014 really had something for everyone, and it also gave us Boyhood, right? That film was in a league of its own.
Oh yeah, Boyd filmed over 12 years with the same cast. It's like a time capsule of adolescence.
Such a unique and ambitious project. Richard Linklater really pushed the boundaries of storytelling with that one.
Okay, so we can't talk about great movie years without mentioning 2004.
2004, bring on the nostalgia.
Seriously, Mean Girls, 13 going on 30, Spider-Man 2, The Incredibles.
And who could forget The Notebook? That movie was a tearjerker for sure.
I know, right? But here's the thing that struck me about 2004. It wasn't just about the big Hollywood blockbusters. There were also these amazing independent films like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and Before Sunset.
Right. They brought this incredible depth and emotional complexity to the table, exploring themes of love, loss, memory.
Exactly. It was a year that had both escapism and introspection, something for every mood. You know, one entry on the list actually made me laugh. Someone claims that 1997 is the best year simply because of Titanic.
Well, Titanic was a phenomenon, you gotta admit. It dominated the box office, broke records, made Leonardo DiCaprio a superstar.
Okay, true. But a whole year based on one film. That's dedication.
I guess so. It shows you how powerful a single film can be, to capture the imagination of an entire generation.
True enough. Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about some of the years that are praised for their realism and social commentary, like 1979 with Apocalypse Now, Kramer versus Kramer Alien. These films weren't afraid to push boundaries.
Right, they tackled some really complex and challenging themes, and in a way that hadn't been seen before. Like Apocalypse Now, it really forced audiences to confront the horrors of the Vietnam War.
And Kramer versus Kramer brought the complexities of divorce and custody battles to the forefront.
And then you have Alien, which completely redefined the sci-fi horror genre. I mean, that film is still terrifying today.
Totally. Okay, so we've got 1979, the year of bold filmmaking. What about 2007? That year seemed to have incredible diversity.
Oh yeah, 2007 was a good one. It gave us everything from the dark humor of In Bruges to the stark realism of No Country for Old Men.
And the quirky charm of Juno, that film was such a breath of fresh air. Plus, you've got the epic scope of There Will Be Blood, one of Daniel Day-Lewis's best performances, for sure.
Agreed. And how could we forget Ratatouille? It proved that animated films could be just as sophisticated and moving as live-action ones.
So true. Okay, moving right along to 1986, a year that feels like a total time capsule of the 80s.
1986. Ah, yes, Platoon, Big Trouble in Little China, Stand By Me, Aliens, Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
What a lineup, right? From war dramas to action comedies, coming-of-age stories to sci-fi thrillers, 1986 had it all.
It perfectly captured the energy and the experimentation that defined the decade. That sense of pushing boundaries and trying new things.
Yeah, and the impact of those films is undeniable. Like Platoon, it brought the realities of the Vietnam War to a whole new generation.
And Stand By Me, it captured the magic and the bittersweet nostalgia of childhood friendship.
And Ferris Bueller's Day Off, it became this anthem for teenage rebellion and living life to the fullest.
It's amazing how these films from a single year can have such a profound and lasting impact on our culture.
Right. Like, how is it even possible for one year to produce so much cinematic gold?
That's the magic of movies, I guess. Okay, so one more year, we got to talk about 1987.
1987, bring it on.
All right, so we're talking RoboCop, Predator, The Princess Bride, Dirty Dancing, Lethal Weapon.
Dirty Dancing, I mean the music, the dancing, the romance. And Lethal Weapon, the ultimate buddy cop movie.
Those films really push the boundaries of action, special effects, and storytelling. They still hold up today.
They really do. Okay, so what about you listening? Did any of these 1987 films have a major impact on your life? Let us know. It's crazy, right? Like, these movies, they become part of us, part of our shared language.
They really do. It's like they shape our collective memory. And that's what makes exploring these best year lists so much fun. It's like a journey through film history, through the evolution of our cultural tastes.
Totally. And speaking of evolution, there are a couple entries on here that remind you just how subjective this whole best year thing is. Like someone claims 2020 was amazing because of Sonic the Hedgehog.
You know what? I respect that. It's a good reminder that there's no accounting for taste. What resonates with one person might not do anything for someone else.
Exactly. And to be fair, Sonic was a fun movie, but here's where it gets really interesting. Someone is already calling 2023 the best year ever, and they're basing it on one film.
Wow, that's a bold prediction. It speaks to the power of a single movie, to capture the zeitgeist to become a cultural phenomenon.
It really does. Okay, so before we wrap up this deep dive, there are a few more years we need to touch on. We got 1962, the year that gave us Lawrence of Arabia, To Kill a Mockingbird, and The Longest Day.
1962. Talk about cinematic giants. I mean, those films were epic in every sense of the word.
They really were. Okay, and then there's 2011. It might not have had the same critical acclaim as some of the other years, but it definitely delivered at the box office.
2011, yeah. It was a big year for sequels, Pirates of the Caribbean, Sherlock Holmes.
Big budget spectacles galore. Okay, and finally, we can't forget 1977, the year that launched the cultural behemoth that is Star Wars.
Star Wars, a true game changer. It ushered in a whole new era of sci-fi cinema.
It really did. Well, folks, it seems we've reached the end of our journey through the best movie years ever.
What a ride. We've traveled through time, revisited classics, discovered hidden gems.
We've debated quality versus quantity, explored the evolution of acting, and witnessed the rise of the blockbuster. And through it all, I think one thing has become clear: the concept of the best movie year is totally subjective.
Absolutely. What matters is finding those films that speak to you personally. The ones that transport you to other worlds, evoke powerful emotions, and stay with you long after the credits roll.
The films that make up your cinematic landscape.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a question. If you could choose to live through any single year in film history, knowing you'd get to experience all those movies in theaters, which year would you choose?
What year would you choose to relive? Think about the films that shaped your love of cinema, the stories that moved you, the characters that you connected with. Let us know in the comments.
Yeah, we want to hear from you.
And with that, we encourage you to keep exploring these movie years. Maybe create a watch list inspired by our discussion. Until next time, happy viewing.